Hi, this is Ava from Soul GPS. Welcome. Can betrayal create resentment? The short answer to this quite complicated question that I'm going to try to unpack for you today in this video is yes, absolutely. It can breed resentment. In fact, it is to be expected that at some point in your journey of healing and integrating this experience of having been betrayed deeply by someone you trust, you're going to have to come face to face with resentment, which basically comes from the fear of it happening again to you. So a recovery from an abusive relationship in which you've been betrayed, whether it is by a coworker, a friend, a boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, mother, father, brother, sister, child, it can be truly anyone. It doesn't change the pain, the degree of pain that you experience as a result of it. It is a very complicated process to heal from this, and it requires a lot of time. It requires a lot of loving care and attention. It requires a tremendous amount of compassion and empathy that you will need to direct towards yourself, and then also later on in the second stage that I'm going to outline here for you towards others. So here it's more or less what it looks like when you first come to terms with the shocking truth that you have been betrayed by someone you trusted, which feels like a knife that's been just put in your heart from behind because you didn't expect it. It is shocking. It is debilitatingly hurtful. It feels as if your life just completely stops. You may feel like there's no point on living. You may feel like you don't want to continue, because if people close to you, people who you thought loved you, can do this, then what does it mean about the rest of the world? If you've had those thoughts, these feelings, know that that's normal. Everyone goes through it. It's kind of like this disillusionment, this point where we begin to see abuse happening all around us. And it's true, it is happening all around us. All you need to do is really turn on the television to see it. But most of us, we're immune to this. It's been normalized. It's part of our life, so we don't pay attention to it until it hits us so hard. It literally levels us. It destroys us into pieces. And when we enter that stage where we cross that line, where the denial drops, what happens is we begin to see it everywhere. There's also a degree of projection that happens during that time, which is that our own core that's been hurt is looking out. It's being watchful to make sure that this doesn't happen again. Also, there is a degree of withdrawal that occurs, which is also very biological, really, and it's normal, very normal. It's a good thing that you withdraw. It's kind of like an animal that's been wounded by a predator. It's not going to lick its wounds and heal in the open field. It needs to withdraw into a cave. It needs to be in a protected environment so that it can heal. And that's the same thing that happens to us. So if you find yourself isolating yourself, that is a stage that is you starting to form new boundaries around yourself that are going to provide you with the safety that you need so that you can find yourself and make sense of what just happened. That stage, which I call stage one, this is arbitrary. You can slice it and dice it many different ways. There are many different models. I'm just using a simple one of 2 stages for a specific reason in this video, because I want to address especially the later stage 2 of what happens and how your life can be sabotaged in a different way, in a kind of an unexpected way, especially if you're trying to build something new for yourself, your new life. Because this channel and a lot of channels that deal with narcissistic abuse and this topic talk a lot about this stage 1, so you probably know a lot about this already. It is painstaking, it's lengthy, it's mythical, it's like the hero's journey. Some people use that analogy. or the descent into the underworld where nothing makes sense, everything's upside down, you feel like you've lost ground beneath your feet, like you're just a balloon drifting, and you're re-evaluating everything. Suddenly suddenly everything becomes relevant. The smallest detail is relevant. It's like you're on a hallucinatory, I don't know if that word exists, like like you're on a trip, on a psychedelic trip that just doesn't end, and it's a bad trip on top of it. So, and it can drag for some time. What is the best thing to do while you're in stage 1? If you're fortunate, you have somebody to talk to. It helps to have a sane person with you, or someone who's been through it, a therapist, a coach, a family member, a friend, anyone who can help you discern truth from fiction, because that's ultimately what it's about. We're fighting a battle inside. It's a bit of a war going on where we're trying to figure out what's real and what isn't. And a lot of the time when we're in toxic relationships, we're being pulled in to an illusory reality that has nothing to do with truth. It's the reality of the person who's oppressing you, and at the same time trying to paint themselves as your savior, which is very confusing, very crazy making. I'm not going to go too deeply into it in this video again, because I've made a ton of videos on this topic already, and other coaches have as well, so I'm sure you're already quite familiar with it. But for validation purposes, it can feel like you're going mad, and the truth is you're not going mad. It's just that you have broken through a layer of denial, and you're coming to terms with the truth. But you're most likely swinging from one extreme to the other. So, for example, you're going from being highly agreeable and naive and innocent to a degree, because if you haven't been bitten by the vampire, if you don't have the poison in you yet, then you may believe, and it's a beautiful belief and a beautiful paradigm to be dwelling in, that everyone in the world is good, that everyone is good at their essence. And yeah, the spirit flame, the soul, is benign, it's good, it is benevolent even, but some people make the choice to allow it to dim to the degree where their survival traits, their malevolence takes over, and that is something that is very difficult to reconcile, and it's very difficult to encounter and make sense out of, especially if you've grown up with the belief, or you've followed the again, beautiful belief, or some of us have gone down the new age trend, or whatever trend you've gone down. You believe that everyone's good, so you're much more prone to agreeing with people, you're much more prone to having looser boundaries, and you're more susceptible to manipulation. So from that end of the spectrum, that extreme end of kind of becoming the yes person, you then swing the opposite direction, and you suddenly become the no person. You withdraw, which you need to do, but the boundaries start to rigidify and become like walls. So there's a danger here at this stage. It's kind of the stage in between stage 1 and stage 2, where you may feel like you don't want to interact with people anymore, you lose trust, you stop believing in love, that such thing even exists. You do this as a form of self-protection. It's quite normal, but you don't want to stay there. I've heard from some people who have been there for quite a while, for many years, and if that's your choice, if it comes from, you know, hey, I just want to be alone, I don't want to be with anybody, I don't want to go through this anymore, it's trailed me all my life, I'm finally happy, I've created my own oasis, my own haven, I don't want anybody, that's fine, that's your choice. However, if you do want partnership, and you do want to feel connection with other people again, then you're gonna need to prepare for stage 2, and that is emerging back into society and facing yourself in a new way that perhaps you've never faced before. And this is what this is kind of the core of this video. I know it's taking me some time to get to here, but it was important to create the lead-in. I'm going to take a look at some notes here, because this reintegration requires large degrees of individual responsibility. Saying no and having withdrawn and having said no to abuse was the first stage of responsibility, where you no longer trust the outside world to always treat you well and to always make sure that you're going to be okay. This is kind of what's supposed to happen in our childhoods, right? And then the mother pushes the bird out of the nest and it's like, okay, your turn to learn to fly. So we kind of have to do the same thing. And it's a painful lesson to be learned, to realize that, you know, we are responsible to a large degree for what happens to us. We are not responsible for absolutely everything, because there are a lot of random things that happen in our life that we have no control over. But there are certain things we are responsible for, such as the choice we make as to who we stay with, right? Who do we choose to live with? What are the people that we let into our life? What kind of jobs do we end up living, right? And anyway, so there's a whole list of choices that we can make, and they require individual responsibility. Now, things start to take a whole new flavor once you get to the point in your life where you are ready to enter a new relationship after having been through a toxic relationship or hurtful relationship. Because what can happen, and what likely will happen, is that unresolved issues such as resentment, which stem from fear of it happening again, may start bubbling to the top. Other things may bubble to the top, such as an incessant need to control your own space because you felt invaded most of your life. Now you want to control it. You want things to be your way, and there can be a certain amount of stubbornness, impatience that sets in with people who are just, you know, not the way that you think they should be, right? There's a certain degree of self-righteousness. It's almost like developing a bit of an ego, like a spiritual ego, like now you know better, you've been through it, so you want things your way, right? There could be anger, there could be also bitterness, right? Judgment, aloofness. So what I want to say here, and this may sound kind of radical, but stick with me, is that these are not bad when they come up. You don't want to squash them, push them away, pretend they're not there, and put a veneer over it, because that's what narcissists do, right? They're full of negative emotions, but they will put that fake mask over it and pretend they're not there. Instead, what you want to do is look at it with a sober eyes and face it and work through it. This is the point or the stage at which we become aware that we also are capable of betrayal. We're also capable of negative emotions. We're also capable of judgment, of resentment, of doing things that may hurt other people. This is a sign of maturity. This is a stage that is so revelatory and in many ways revolutionary, that it's when the game is really on, right? It's like first stage, game is on, but this stage is like it's really on, right? This is where we have this incredible potential. We stand at the doorway of becoming very wise and very much in control of our impulses, because these are, again, primal impulses that mostly stem from survival. It's taken us millions of years to get to where we are, and most of that time we didn't live in homes with heat and running water. We were out in the field surviving. So we need to have respect for where we came from, and also have respect for the emotions that will be coming up. Now, the emotions are a lot like little children. They need to be tamed. They need to be controlled. So this is an opportunity for you to not shut these things down, but instead to look at them. This is about integrating your shadow. Again, we're swinging from the yes extreme side of the spectrum to the no extreme side of the spectrum. Eventually, the idea is to arrive at the middle, so we can be very discerning in our situations and still continue to protect our space, guard our boundaries, but at the same time allow those boundaries not to become walls, for them to be flexible enough so that we can step into the reality of the other person that we're sharing a life with, and be okay without the need to control things too much, or for them to act in a way that we expect of them, right? Now that we've been through this experience. So there is a certain amount of softness and return to innocence that is asked for. It's kind of like what Jesus said, right? Like something about reintegrating your inner child, becoming like an innocent, like the child again, to enter the kingdom of heaven. This is exactly right. We need to become tough. We need to build up a strong armor and learn how to fight and be vicious and dangerous. But then once you know you can do it, the true act of wisdom and courage is to not act on it of course, unless you need it, unless you're again encountering abuse, then you want to pull out your sword, you want to get your shield up, and you want to do what you know is right. But when you're in a benign context with people who are loving, who may be just triggering you a little bit, you got to be watchful and be careful so that you don't go overboard and allow those resentful thoughts and emotions to then butt in uninvited and inappropriate and start to dominate a very benign environment. So this is a danger in new relationships as you are coming out of toxic relationships, something to be aware of. I want to read a quote to you here from Carl Jung before I give you some steps that you can use in order to overcome this, in order to work with this in real life, because I guarantee you will bump against this. The quote says, "No tree, it is said, can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell." And it is so true. This is again just a beautiful portrayal of the integration of light and shadow. You know what's good. You know what's right. You know what you want to fight for. You know you've touched evil, you've tasted, you've brushed against it. It's the vampire has bitten you, the poison is in your blood, so you know what it tastes like. You want to now be very careful so you don't do this to other people. And that's how you create that beautiful balance and wholeness in your life. You know you can, you know you could hurt, you know you could be dangerous, you know your power. You know you're capable of destroying. It's like in Hinduism we have Shiva, the destroyer, right? He is actually elevated to the stature of very high God, primary God. So the act of destroying is also part of creation. So you know you can do it, but you're very discerning and very careful with the way that you use your sword. You use it towards evil, you don't use it towards good, right? So you need to be able to learn to control your impulses. And there's actually something really great about that. It can give you a tremendous amount of empowering, and that to know that, wow, now you're learning to overcome parts of yourself. Now, how incredibly powerful that is, right? It's similar with meditation. When you first learn to meditate, you may realize how incessant the thoughts are, how difficult it is to control them. But over time, you start to gain control, and your life takes on a completely different course, a different flavor. Everything feels more relaxed, more spacious. So these are the disciplines that are really worth taking on. Also, I want to mention something that Jordan Peterson had said in his lectures. I really enjoy listening to him, and I get some of his ideas from my own self-development from listening to him. I don't know what your stance is on him. I think he's great, personally. But he talks about true versus fake morality. And again, I couldn't agree with him more. He draws from Jung again here, which is that the person who deems to be moral and good because he or she are afraid of the repercussions of their acts doesn't have a strong morality. That's not strength and courage, that's weakness. We're afraid that if we do something, we're going to be hurt. We're going to have to bear the blunt of consequences for it. True morality comes as a result of understanding and being really in touch with your destructive side, with the side of you that can hurt, that can retaliate, but not acting on those impulses. That's true morality, because that is really tough to do. So what is the solution? What is the solution? The solution is compassion and empathy. So in a sense, we're back to square one, because some may think that compassion and empathy are what got us into trouble, right? In the first place, it got us into the relationship with a toxic, destructive individual. But that's more hyper empathy. That is when we are sort of lopsided. There's only half of us that's been activated without the shadow self being activated, you see. Because when we're only acting out of empathy and believe that we always have to agree with people and please them, that's what makes us susceptible. But when we understand how incredibly healing and building compassion is, but that it doesn't really have as much power without the other side, the shadow side, then it's just not as potent. So what we need to do, if we don't want to let our resentment, after what we've been through, that's still in us, to not let our resentment to pollute our life and our new relationships with anger, bitterness, being sour, being impatient and aloof and self-righteous, is we need to recultivate that compassion. Now, we're not talking about hyper empathy when it's out of balance. We're talking about coming back into the center where we are fully capable of saying yes and we're fully capable of saying no, and we know the difference. We can draw the discernment between the two. So I want to now finish by giving you a 6-step process of what you can do when you feel yourself being in the throes of being thrown off balance by a trigger while you're being in a benign situation. I'm not talking about an abusive situation. I'm talking about a benign situation. How to overcome your resentment. And here it is. Step number 1 is you need to realize what is at stake. Are you close to losing a relationship? Are you maybe risking losing an opportunity towards growth or intimacy? So you need to realize what that is. Immediately find a space where you can be by yourself, take a few breaths, and start to count your blessings. Start to feel grateful for what it is that you have now in your life. Look at everything that is going well and positive. Now look at the one trigger that is causing the resentment, and try to isolate the small issue from the big value and separate the two. The next thing you want to do is, when you're feeling those heavy emotions, extend compassion and empathy towards yourself. Know that what you're feeling is not you. These emotions and these instincts, these impulses, these are not you. They're just impulses, emotions, and instincts. That's all that they are. What you are is you are the transformative power that makes them change, that allows them to turn into something else. You are the transmutator of them. That's who you are, and you're the awareness behind it. So don't let yourself get caught up by these emotions, but also absolutely do not shame yourself for it. These are very human. This is something we all deal with, and it's okay. Just allow yourself to get some distance, and like I said, absolutely do not shame yourself for it. That's what the narcissist will do for you, right? The moment they sniff out that you have any dark emotion in you, which they can tell because they know them too quite intimately, they're going to shame you for it. Don't allow that to happen. Don't do that to yourself. So you want to first empathize with yourself, and then immediately flip the switch and empathize with the other person. See how what you're doing, what you're saying, how you're acting is what kind of an effect it's having on the other person. So you're basically putting yourself in their shoes. The key here for the balancing act is to be able to feel empathy for yourself and for the other person at the same time. That's where the gold is at. Next thing you want to do is really learn to control those impulses. Breathe into them, watch them, try not to fight them, because the moment you start to fight them and tell them that they're bad, they're going to get stronger. So just accept them, welcome them in, just don't act on them. That's how you control them. You allow them to be there, you just don't act on them. And finally, be humble and honest about it. If you're in a relationship with someone, who is a good listener, who's compassionate himself or herself, with whom you've had these conversations before, someone who is also very much growth and truth oriented, then you can absolutely share your experience and say, this is what you're feeling, this is what you're going through, and I guarantee you it will only bring you closer. So I hope that this was helpful to you. If you have any thoughts and ideas that you'd like to share, I welcome you to do this. I would love to hear from you. I would love to know how you've dealt in situations like that, if you've encountered them. How do you work with resentment? So if you have any tips for us, please write them down below. And again, thank you so much for all of your support, and I especially love the community support that happens down in the comments below, because when you comment on each other's comments and help one another, that is just the most beautiful thing. So I want to continue to encourage you to do that, and thank you for that. And finally, thank you so much for your letters and your questions. For some of you who have been following me for a while may know that I have had some health challenges recently, so I've taken a bit of a step back and a break from YouTube, but I am now feeling better. I'm going to soon make a video about my experiences and what I've done to heal myself. So thank you for your support, thank you for your patience, and I want to wish you a beautiful morning, day, afternoon, or evening. Thank you so much, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.